There is a brown suitcase under my bed that I still have not unpacked completely. It is raining hard outside my apartment in Cebu, the kind of rain that turns the street silver and drums against the metal awning over my window. A fan clicks above me. Somewhere downstairs, a woman is frying garlic, and the smell comes up through the open stairwell. I have a mug of instant coffee in my hand. My bare feet are on cool tile, and that old suitcase is 6 inches from my toes. I keep it there because I need the reminder. 18 months ago, that suitcase held almost everything I had left: three shirts, two pairs of pants, a folder of documents, my blood pressure pills, a photograph of my wife, Ellen, taken before either of us knew how quickly a life could come apart, and $1,184 in my checking account. $1,184. That was my retirement fund. My name is Michael Harris. I am 69 years old. I was born and raised in Dayton, Ohio, and I spent 37 years working as a tool and die technician. I was the man who measured things twice. I kept every receipt. I changed the oil in my truck before the sticker told me to. If you had asked anyone who knew me, they would have said I was careful. Careful people are supposed to be all right in retirement. That is what I believed anyway. I had a modest house, a paid off pickup, and just over $96,000 spread between a retirement account and savings. It was not a fortune, but Ellen and I had done the math. Social Security, a small monthly pension from an old employer, and that cushion would carry us. We were going to take day trips. She wanted to see Maine in the fall. I wanted a little fishing boat I would probably use 6 times a year and talk about every day. Then Ellen got sick. At first, it was appointments, tests, and copays. Then it was drives to Columbus, hotel rooms near the hospital, prescriptions that changed every few weeks, and things the insurance company called non essential. I never understood that word. Nothing feels non essential when the person you love is looking at you from a hospital bed. I stopped checking the total because the total did not matter. If a treatment offered us another month, I paid. If a specialist might know something the others had missed, we went. I sold the pickup. I pulled money from the retirement account. I put expenses on a credit card and told myself I would deal with them when she was better. I know. Famous last words. Ellen died 11 months after her diagnosis. She was 66. I was sitting beside her holding a paper cup of cold coffee when the room went quiet. After the funeral, the bills kept arriving as if nobody had told them she was gone. I sold the house to clear the mortgage balance, the cards, and the medical debt that remained. By the time the last payment left my account, the careful man with the retirement plan had become a widower sleeping in his daughter's spare room. You're 68 years old, lying awake in a room painted pale green because it used to belong to your 9-year-old granddaughter. There are glow in the dark stars on the ceiling. Your clothes are in plastic bins. You can hear your daughter and her husband whispering in the kitchen about money, and even though they never say your name, you are certain every sentence is about you. That was me. My daughter Rachel never made me feel unwanted. I want to be clear about that. She said I could stay as long as I needed. Her husband was decent to me. My granddaughter liked having me there. The shame came from inside my own head. I had spent my whole life being useful. Suddenly, I was asking which shelf in the refrigerator I could use. My Social Security came to $1,742 a month. The small pension I had counted on disappeared years earlier when the company reorganized. I had known that, but Ellen and I had planned around it. Alone, with no house and almost no savings, every option felt temporary. I tried everything I could think of before I considered leaving the country. I applied for income based senior apartments. The waiting lists were long. I priced one-bedroom apartments outside Dayton, then farther away in Springfield and Middletown. By the time I added rent, utilities, food, a car, insurance, and medication, the numbers did not bend, they broke. I looked for work. I stocked shelves at a hardware store 3 mornings a week, but standing on concrete made my knees swell until I could barely climb Rachel's stairs. I answered ads for inspection work, thinking someone might value my experience. Most wanted 10-hour shifts or computer certifications I did not have. I even considered renting a room from another retired man. The room smelled like cigarettes, the bathroom door did not close, and he spent 20 minutes explaining why I was not allowed to use his kitchen after 7 at night. I sat in my car afterward and laughed. Then I cried. The Philippines entered my life through a man named Danny Cole, a former co-worker I had not spoken to in 7 years. Rachel had posted a photograph from Ellen's memorial service. Danny saw it, sent me a message, and asked if he could call. He was living in Cebu. I remembered him as a loud man who complained about everything, so when he told me he was happy, I assumed he had joined a cult. He turned his phone around and showed me his small apartment, the balcony, and a bowl of mangoes on his table. Then he told me his rent, 17,000 pesos. At the exchange rate, then, about $300. I asked him what was wrong with it. He laughed and said, "The water pressure has opinions, and the rooster next door is an enemy of sleep. Other than that, nothing." That night, I typed "retire in the Philippines" into YouTube. By 2 in the morning, I had watched videos about Cebu, Iloilo, Dumaguete, and places I could not pronounce. Some made it sound like paradise. Some made it sound like every foreigner was going to be robbed before leaving the airport. For 3 weeks, I watched everything. Then I stopped watching the polished videos and started reading expat forums, Facebook groups, cost breakdowns written by people who included boring things like laundry detergent, visa renewals, and replacement eyeglasses. I messaged men who had been there for 10 years and men who had gone home after 6 months. I asked what they wished they had known. The honest answers made me trust the idea more, not less. They told me the heat could drain you. Traffic could turn a short trip into an afternoon. Loneliness did not disappear just because palm trees were outside. They warned me not to lend money I could not afford to lose, not to rush into a relationship, and not to sign a long lease before learning the neighborhood. And they also told me ordinary people live there on ordinary incomes, regular people, not rich. That phrase stayed with me. I made a spreadsheet. Of course I did. Careful Michael was still in there somewhere. I priced a flight, temporary lodging, health coverage, medication, food, transportation, and a return ticket I promised Rachel I would keep enough money to buy. I sold the few tools I had stored in her garage. I sold my recliner, my television, and Ellen's old sewing machine to a woman who promised she would use it. The morning I left, Rachel drove me to the airport. She kept asking if I was sure. I kept saying yes, because if I admitted how frightened I was, I might have turned around. My granddaughter hugged me and slipped a folded note into the side pocket of my suitcase. I did not read it until I was on the plane. It said, "Grandpa, find a place where you smile again." I still carry that note in my wallet. When I walked out of the airport on Mactan Island, the air felt wet enough to drink. My glasses fogged. Drivers called out to me. Cars moved in patterns that made no sense. I had been traveling for what felt like 2 days. My back hurt, and for 10 full minutes, I was convinced I had made the worst mistake of my life. Danny found me standing beside the wrong pickup area, gripping my suitcase like somebody planned to steal it. He took me to a small hotel and told me not to make any decisions for a week. That advice saved me. The first few days were not a postcard. I woke at 3 in the morning. I sweated through my shirt before breakfast. I ordered food I thought would be mild and discovered my definition of mild was not universal. I crossed one street by attaching myself to the movement of a family because I could not figure out when the traffic was supposed to stop. But there were other moments. A hotel employee remembered how I took my coffee. A security guard called me sir and helped me find the right jeepney. At a little eatery, a woman named Lorna showed me the dishes one by one because I did not know what anything was. I had rice, grilled chicken, vegetables, and cold calamansi juice for less than I used to spend on a fast food lunch in Ohio. Nothing dramatic happened. That was the point. For the first time in months, I went through an entire day without feeling like a problem somebody else had to solve. After 2 weeks, Danny helped me look for an apartment. I rejected the first place because it faced a road that never seemed to sleep. The second had a beautiful view and a staircase my knees hated. The third was in a quieter part of Cebu City, up one flight of stairs near a small bakery and a pharmacy. The walls were cream. The tile was cool under my shoes. There was a narrow balcony with room for one chair. The kitchen was barely a kitchen, but the window opened and I could see the tops of two mango trees beyond the neighboring roofs. The rent was 15,500 pesos a month, about $275 at the time. I paid 1 month in advance and a deposit. I bought a mattress, a fan, 2 plates, one pan, a rice cooker, and the cheapest table I could find. For the first week, the table wobbled because I had assembled one leg backward. A retired tool and die man defeated by 4 screws and a diagram. Ellen would have laughed until she cried. My first full month cost more than I expected. Deposits, household items, transportation, and the mistakes every newcomer makes pushed me close to the edge. I took taxis when I was confused. I bought imported cereal, then stared at the receipt as if the cashier had personally betrayed me. I paid too much for a phone plan because I was embarrassed to ask questions. That embarrassment was expensive, so I started asking. Lorna showed me where to buy vegetables. Danny taught me which rides to book and when walking was faster. My landlord's son explained how to pay the electric bill. I learned to carry a small towel because sweating is not a personal failure here. I learned that plans change when the rain comes, and getting angry at the rain does not make you dry. By the third month, my budget settled. That did not happen because I became an expert. It happened because I built a routine simple enough to repeat. On the first morning of every month, I sat at my wobbly table with a notebook and wrote down the same categories: housing, food, utilities, transportation, health, paperwork, emergency fund. I converted pesos to dollars using a slightly worse exchange rate than the one on my phone, so a currency swing would not surprise me. If money was left after that, it could be spent. If it was not, I stayed home and made coffee. I also gave myself one rule: I would not pretend to be wealthier than I was just because some people assumed a foreign retiree had money. In the beginning, saying no made me uncomfortable. I had spent decades being the man who picked up the check. Here, I had to learn that generosity without a limit is not generosity. It is another way to lose control. The first time I faced a real problem, that little bit of discipline mattered. My air conditioner stopped working during a week when the heat seemed to press against the windows. The repair was 4,800 pesos, around $85. Back in Ohio, an unexpected bill had started a chain of panic. In Cebu, I took the money from the household reserve, paid the technician, and went on with my day. It was only $85, but I sat at the table afterward and stared at the receipt. I had handled it myself. I had not called Rachel. I had not used a credit card. I had not moved one problem into the following month and hoped it would disappear. That receipt meant more to me than any beach photograph ever could. Rent was about $275. Electricity, water, internet, and phone averaged $118. Food was usually $260, including the occasional meal out. Transportation came to around $75. Medication, health coverage, household needs, and the money I set aside for immigration expenses and emergencies took the rest of my planned spending to roughly $1,170 a month. $1,170 against an income of $1,742. For the first time since Ellen got sick, money entered my account and some of it stayed there. I did not feel rich. I felt something better. I felt safe enough to breathe. I want to be honest about what that budget does not mean. It does not mean every American can move here and live well on the same amount. It does not mean medical emergencies vanish. I keep a reserve, I review my coverage, and I know a serious illness could change everything again. I do not live in a luxury tower. I do not eat steak every night. I do not spend my days on a beach with a drink in my hand. My life is smaller than that and more real. Most mornings I walk before the heat gets heavy. I buy pandesal from the bakery downstairs. The woman behind the counter started setting aside the softer rolls after she saw me struggle with a bad tooth. On Wednesdays, I meet Danny for coffee. On Sundays, Lorna's family sometimes invites me to lunch. Her grandchildren correct my Cebuano words and laugh when I get them wrong. I laugh too. That might sound ordinary. After a year of feeling like a guest in my daughter's home and a burden in my own mind, ordinary feels like a miracle. There was one afternoon about 6 months after I arrived when Rachel called. She was sitting in her car between errands. She asked whether I was eating enough, whether I was taking my pills, whether the apartment was secure. Then she became quiet. She said, "Dad, you sound like yourself again." I looked around my little apartment. Laundry was drying on a rack near the window. The fan was clicking. A pot of rice had just finished cooking. There was nothing impressive in the room, but every object in it belonged to a life I was managing on my own. I told her I felt like myself again. That was not completely true. I will never be the man I was before Ellen got sick. Grief follows you through airports. It sits beside you on airplanes. It waits quietly while you learn a new city, then finds you when a song plays in a grocery store. Moving to Cebu did not cure grief. It gave my grief somewhere to live that was not my daughter's spare room. There is a difference. I have made mistakes here. I trusted one man who promised to arrange a better apartment and disappeared with a small reservation fee. I should have known better. I spent too much trying to recreate an American diet instead of learning what was available locally. I went through a stretch when I stayed inside because the traffic and noise wore me down. There were evenings when I wondered whether I had confused escape with courage. But each time I came back to the numbers and the life around them. My savings account now holds a little over $7,000. It is not enough for complacency, but it is more than I had when I arrived. I video call Rachel twice a week. I visited a clinic before I needed one, so I know where to go. I know my neighbors. I know the bakery closes early when the owner's son has a basketball game. I know which corner floods after an hour of hard rain. Belonging, I have learned, is not one grand moment when a place accepts you. It is 100 small moments when you stop feeling lost. People ask whether I moved because the Philippines is cheap. The honest answer is yes at first. I had no savings in one suitcase. Affordability was not a lifestyle preference, it was the door that happened to be open. But cheap is not why I stayed. I stayed because dignity returned in quiet pieces, paying my own rent, choosing what to eat, helping Lorna's grandson fix the loose wheel on his bicycle, sending my granddaughter $20 for her birthday without checking my balance first, waking up with a reason to leave the apartment. I stayed because I am no longer waiting for my real life to resume. This is my real life. Now the rain is easing outside. Water runs from the awning in a thin stream, and somebody downstairs has started a motorcycle. My coffee is cold. The brown suitcase is still under the bed. There are a few things left inside it: Ellen's photograph, my granddaughter's note, the folder that once held every document I thought stood between me and disaster. I could put those things in a drawer. I could throw the suitcase away. Maybe one day I will. For now, I keep it where I can see it, not because I am afraid I will have to leave, but because I remember the man who arrived carrying it. He thought he had reached the end of everything. He did not know that an ending in an empty room can look exactly the same at first. Then you buy a mattress. You learn the road, you find the bakery, you begin again.